Welcome to the Solid Verbal.
The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildebrand. Joining me, as always, over there in beautiful New York City, my man, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
Ty, I just took, it wasn't a coffee nap. It was a green tea nap.
Okay.
If we're going to be very specific. It
Sure.
was a green tea and blueberry Danish nap. Come on.
Okay, you're very old.
I can't put anything. I know, I am. I went to the library today. I went to a coffee shop.
It's happening.
But at said coffee shop, I did a deep dive of my own into Clemson, Alabama. And I would say we ended the previous episode, the New Year's Eve recap show, with me feeling a little bit sour. Not sour, but jaded by the matchup of Clemson, Alabama. I think I'm in a little bit of a better place right now.
Well, that's typically what happens. As you know, we normally go to the national championship. We're not there this year, but typically what you find happening, especially when you talk to the media folk that go to such things, is everyone comes in with one assumption, and over the course of like 4 or 5 days of being there and constantly talking about the game, eventually people talk themselves into just the opposite, or at a minimum, talk themselves a little bit more into the game, get a little bit more amped up for the game.
Famously, me and Notre Dame over Alabama.
Right. No, and I think I'm with you.
Yeah.
On that front as well. We've got Clemson, we've got Alabama. We've had people write in, and they've indicated their own level of malaise with this matchup, but nonetheless, we are previewing it with a few days to spare to give everyone a chance to prepare themselves accordingly for the one big game, Dan. It's for all the marbles. They're playing it in Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. It is the College Football Playoff National Championship presented by AT&T.
Yes. Can we paint as complete a picture as we possibly can, since we are only talking about one game? Although I guess we can do a North Dakota State, Eastern Washington pick. But I want to zoom out as wide as we possibly can.
Yes.
So let's start with 2018. Let's start with the game itself. Santa Clara sucks. I mean, it's fine as a place. Like, it's terrible. But the stadium sucks. The fact that it's there sucks because it's just nowhere near the capital of college football, which is, for all intents and purposes in 2018, probably Atlanta.
Sure.
Okay, so whatever it is, doesn't matter where the actual capital is, but it's not Northern California. And if it's going to be in California, it should be at the Rose Bowl. If it's going to be elsewhere, just do it somewhere warm and attractive for people to visit. That's the Bay Area in late December, early January is not it. So, do you argue with any of those points first off?
Yeah, no, I'm on board with most of that. Sure.
Yeah, they wanted it to be like a Super Bowl thing where it's just like, oh man, this whole city gets crazy for this game, and it's just not it. So that aside, go get a torta at Mexico Bakery in San Jose if you're in the area. It's literally just called Mexico Bakery, Ty.
Okay.
And if there's a long line,
very literally named,
literally Mexico Bakery, and if there's a long line, they've been known to pass out donuts because that's pretty cool by me. Second off, let's start. You want to start Clemson or Alabama in terms of this season?
Let's start with Alabama.
And just your perception of the 2018 Alabama team.
Yeah, being so Alabama is the defending champion. Again, they were in this game a year ago. They won in overtime. It was the start of this Tua Tunga Vailoa fever that has gripped the nation now for the better part of a year. My general impression of Alabama doesn't have many weaknesses. And they're so deep that even if their star quarterback goes down, they've still got a quarterback in Jalen Hurts on the roster who can come in and provide the necessary pop to get them over the finish line. We saw that in the SEC championship game, right?
Yeah, I want an even wider angle lens, though. Did you have fun watching Alabama this season? What was the wave of your emotions? What was that ride like? Did you watch a lot of Alabama? I know you watched a lot of the big stuff and medium-sized stuff, but, was the Alabama 2018 experience unique to this year, or do you feel like it almost ran together with other years?
Well, to some degree, the answer is both, right? Because the success has been continuous since Nick Saban got there. And so it's very easy for one season to run into the next just because they always win. This is just this brand that Nick Saban's built while he's been at Alabama.
Jerry Jeudy is to Calvin Ridley, is to Amari Cooper, is to blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I think that's right. But it is different in the sense that the offense has changed gradually over the course of time, whereas before it might have been more lineup opposite the opponent, run it down their throat with Derrick Henry or whoever, have more of a game manager quarterback in an A.J. McCarron. Now we've got Tua Tagovailoa, who can do a whole hell of a lot more than a guy like McCarron. The offense, I think, has very gradually shifted more towards like a spread. It's a little bit more wide open than I think we've seen over the course of time with Nick Saban. So there have been subtle differences that have made this Alabama experience a little bit different than in the past. But ultimately, I think it's shaded by the fact that Bama remains virtually unbeatable from week to week.
Yeah, and it's to your point, part of it is the movie, Death Machine robot who the humans are saying, "Oh my God, it's evolving."
Right.
Oh my God, it's learning the languages. It's heat seeking, and that is it's Nick Saban having to reload not just players because he goes through there's so much attrition with guys leaving early, but also coaches. And at a certain point, if you are going to find the best coaches, you are going to find the most innovative coaches and the coaches, a combination of most wanting to be on a platform to be visible for their own careers, but also somebody who has the ability to weather the pressures that come with coaching in Tuscaloosa. And we've seen that year over year, whether it's, very briefly Steve Sarkisian, but Lane Kiffin and now Mike Locksley, Mario Cristobal was there. There are all these names that come through and that Nick Saban just gets the best out of. And so with this year's iteration, it is some sort of combination of what Dan Enos is the quarterback's coach and I guess future offensive coordinator, and then Mike Locksley and Josh Gaddis, who came over from Penn State. And we obviously saw, I wouldn't say the crater-sized mark that he left by leaving there, but certainly the receivers in the offense wasn't the same without Josh Gaddis. So to me, that is just such a crazy impressive thing that it's not just not missing a beat, but it's not missing a beat putting on bionic arms every year. It's madness.
Yeah, and to some degree, maybe this will sound goofy, it remains pretty amazing to me that guys are as willing to go to Alabama knowing that they're going to be a third string.
Mm-hmm.
This program has built this level of acclaim now where guys just want to go there. They want to be part of it. They know if they are part of it, it's going to bode well for their NFL chances, but it's a risk. It's a risk at this point if you're a 5-star going to Alabama because you're going to be surrounded by so many other 5-stars. There are no guarantees. It's an embarrassment of riches that Nick Saban has built in Tuscaloosa, and that's part of the reason why this program feels like certainly has gotten a critical mass. There is just so much talent, so much depth of talent that it far exceeds the nearest competition. Now, that being said, I suppose when we talk about Clemson, we could talk a bit about their journey getting to a similar point because among all the other competition in college football, Clemson is, I think, the closest to Alabama with having that depth of talent. Georgia is getting to that level, that depth of talent of Alabama. But we're really talking about rarefied air here.
Yeah, because it's not just the getting of talent that the Seinfeld, it's not just taking the reservation. It's not just the acquisition of talent, both in the coaching and depth chart. It's what are we developing that talent into vis-a-vis wins and trophies and Heismans and All-Americans. And nobody has done a better job of that than Nick Saban and Alabama. So as it relates, as we zoom in a little bit, as relates to this year, they were Death Machine. They were as entertaining a Death Machine, short of, I like my triple option stuff, but hell, Alabama probably had some option in there. They read players, but the efficiency with which Tua operated, it was a little bit strange that we didn't have a dominant running back in Alabama's system, and like we have in years past, but it's hardly a complaint. The fact that they, had to overcome a bunch of changes with starters on defense, but mind you, like you mentioned, even if you don't start, you're getting in there. So like a lot of these names on defense, even though they were sort of being bemoaned early on in the season because the secondary was pretty raw, working in freshmen and transfers, and obviously Deontay Thompson was back, but dealing with a big injury in the secondary, that even that, by halfway through the season, I mean, they were shutting out LSU and Mississippi State. So it came together, Ty, and that to me it's just madness.
Why don't we go over to the Clemson side?
Okay.
And talk about their journey here. Now, Clemson comes at this from a similar, albeit very different perspective. Clemson, over the course of time under Dabo Swinney, has built up that depth. They've gotten to a point where they can lose a guy like a Dexter Lawrence to a drug test and still plug someone new in and be every bit as effective along the defensive line. That is a luxury that few teams have.
Right.
So they're getting there, and they're also getting there on the quarterback side. Think about this journey for them. Kelly Bryant leads them to the college football playoff a year ago, yet the second Trevor Lawrence steps on campus, people are already talking about when he is going to supplant Bryant.
Right.
And it seemed almost a foregone conclusion before the start of the year that it was going to happen maybe around the time the ACC schedule started. Dabo Swinney's gone on the record. He's talked a lot about it. I don't think he felt great about doing what needed to be done, but he ultimately makes the move. He goes to Trevor Lawrence because he felt Trevor Lawrence gave them the best chance to win. Trevor Lawrence has only gotten better. He had a few moments early where I think he showed his age. He's a true freshman. But over the course of the season, and certainly culminating with what we saw in that college football playoff against Notre Dame, as I know full well, Trevor Lawrence looked every bit the part of a very high-level, elite caliber college football quarterback. He wasn't missing throws. He stood tall in the pocket. He looked extremely poised. I think any story with Clemson in 2018 has to start with the defensive line, but has to move very quickly to where they've gone at quarterback now under Trevor Lawrence.
You have fun watching Clemson this year?
I had more fun watching Clemson than I did Alabama.
I didn't.
No?
And I don't think that it has nothing to do with Clemson. It's just the ACC was such a wreck that there weren't moments with Trevor Lawrence, because that Syracuse game aside obviously came down to the very end. But after that Syracuse game, it was 63-3, 41-7, 59-10, 77-16, 27-7, 35-6,
Right.
56-35, 42-10, and 30-3. Again, not on Clemson. On all of those teams, averaging whatever it was, 11 points.
Again, we're talking about teams that we knew were really, really good. And on some level, we were kind of inventing ways for them to maybe be in close games.
Sure.
You were like, okay, the Syracuse game could be interesting.
Well, they're at A&M, yeah.
Boston College on the road, like, hey, that could be interesting. Even
we didn't know what Florida State's team would look like before the season started.
Even Pitt in the ACC championship game, there was some recent history there. That was
For sure.
interesting on its face. But even despite the fact that we knew Clemson had a huge advantage going into those games.
Well, the one thing that they had in common was turning to a quarterback who clearly had the higher ceiling. These are open air teams, right? There's no clear ceiling for each of these teams. I read Bill Connolly. I think Alabama faced 7 top 20 S&P plus teams, and Notre Dame is the only one Clemson faced. So there was, at least in terms of opponents, production from these opponents otherwise, outside of the Alabama games. Whereas the Clemson opponent resume was pretty weak, all things considered, with where the ACC has been as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, when they perhaps had the deepest roster of quality quarterbacks. And so Alabama, at least, especially in the second half of the year, Mississippi State was a top 10 defense in the country. LSU was a top 8-12 defense when healthy and fully there defense. Certainly, these are not complete teams, especially when you look at their offenses. Auburn, in terms of talent, comparable. Georgia, certainly in terms of pretty much everything, was a touchdown short. So at least there was a sense of Alabama, when they're beating teams down, that they're beating down blue chip talent assembled by mostly blue chip coaching staffs in sometimes difficult environments. When you look at LSU, and certainly playing Georgia in Atlanta is not the easiest deal. So I go back the other direction, that at least with Alabama, their dominance has, here's what I'm going to categorize it as, Ty. It just meant more.
Yeah. Okay.
That doesn't mean they're going to win. It just means my perception of their season comes with a little. I'm more impressed with how they got here. Again, I cannot stress this enough, through no fault of Clemson's, because a team as excellent as Clemson should have done what they did.
Well, according to Bill Connolly's resume ranking, which is something he's added, Alabama's 1, Clemson's 2.
Correct. These are the clear 2 best teams.
Clear 2 best teams. They play on Monday, January the 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. It is the Clemson Tigers at 14-0. It is the Alabama Crimson Tide, your defending national champions, also at 14-0. The point spread here is 6 points in favor of Alabama. The over-under is 59.5. A few interesting tidbits about this game. They've met 18 times dating back to 1900. Alabama's won 14. Clemson's won 4. Most recently, these teams have played in each of the last 3 postseasons. 2 of those 3 were one-possession games. Last year, Bama won 24-6 in the playoff semifinal, sort of the beginning of the end of the Kelly Bryant era. Right. If you're watching at home, you're going to have what? Imagine Dragons and Lil Wayne doing the halftime thing?
That's your halftime show, Ty. Not mine.
They're actually not going to be there. They're going to be performing, I think I saw on Treasure Island in the middle of the bay.
What's Treasure Island?
Treasure Island. It's an artificial island built in the middle of San Francisco Bay.
Not Alcatraz.
Not Alcatraz, no. I don't think they call that Treasure Island.
Alcatraz would have been great. Alcatraz does rule. Okay, cool. I've never heard of Treasure Island. But,
and if you're not going to be there, if you live in the area and you might be interested in going, this could be your lucky day. Because these teams have been the best 2 all year, maybe there is some diminished interest. Maybe because of the location. I don't know. Here's the deal. The ticket prices are dropping. We had originally planned on recording this show yesterday, at which point the lowest price to get in the stadium was around $285. I saw a tweet today that it came down, I think, all the way to $150 at time of recording on Thursday. So if you wait a few days longer, you might be able to get just a rock bottom deal on getting in to see a national championship game here.
Do you think, here's your first prop of the day, over under get in price reported? So somebody actually has to have, taken a screen grab and whatever, it's SeatGeek or whatever.
Oh, this is good. This is good.
$99.99 get in.
I was going to set it at $99.99.
Okay.
I'm going to say somebody gets in for like $85.
Whoa! Not even in the 90s. It's a big stadium. It's a big stadium. Not that previous national championships haven't been, but it's a big stadium, a big distance away. Yeah, I think 85. I might take the under myself.
85. So here's what I think we learned from the semifinals, Dan.
Okay.
We've kind of got extra measuring sticks now that we can use to figure this one out. That's especially true on the Clemson side. Granted, Notre Dame isn't Bama. Not saying they are, but still, for me, I expected that Clemson defensive line to have a good day against Notre Dame, and they absolutely did that. I was most curious about the Clemson offense against a really good defense on the Notre Dame side. How would the line do against the Irish front seven? That was very good. How would Trevor Lawrence look against a good defense in a really big bowl setting?
I know the answer. Good.
Yeah, he looked really good. Both of those boxes, I think, were sufficiently checked for Clemson. And then on the Bama side, it was interesting to me to see a really good tempo offense against their defense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how seriously we take that because Bama was up 21 points at halftime and, sort of killed the clock in the second half. But Kyler Murray finished with over 300 yards, over 100 yards rushing. Otherwise, their offense was sort of a hot knife through butter when they were going up against the Oklahoma defense. Tua missed, 3 passes? So I think everything checked on the Bama side as well. For what it's worth, I think that's what we learned from the semis.
We have probably gone on, I don't know how, about 16, 17 minutes into this show. We haven't mentioned Travis Etienne's name.
Yeah.
And in terms of what we learned from Notre Dame specifically, whatever, but in terms of what we learned from Clemson's season, even though I was not super impressed with their opponents, again, nothing to do with Clemson, Travis Etienne, best running back in the nation. I say that going up at the end of the sentence because it's a question, but I have a hard time figuring out if it's not Jonathan Taylor, tailback. It's Travis Etienne, right?
Travis Etienne is in the conversation.
Well, I mean, who else is there to supplant him?
Well, let me harken back to something Larry Williams said when I had him on for the Homer Show, because I asked him about Travis Etienne. Why wasn't he getting more hype at the time for the Heisman Trophy? His numbers were ridiculous. And he said he doesn't get enough opportunities to be considered a legit Heisman candidate. And maybe not even to be considered as, by many, one of the best running backs in the nation. But you watch him run. It's not just speed. He's got moves. He runs with power. If it's not JTT, this year it certainly wasn't Bryce Love. He was hurt.
No.
You have a real hard time trying to find someone better than what he did this year, better than him this season.
Yeah, there were guys who had nice years, and I think that goes back to Clemson not really having, after Texas A&M, like a true platform game. That everybody's like, oh, here we go. This is when we find out if Clemson's for real. And that, yes, Travion Williams is 100% on that same tier. It would be impossible to talk about running backs. This is not an exercise in, singling out other people, but it's just the year that he had. And it's almost Travis Etienne and the fellas, because, and I'm not even talking about just the offensive line. This Clemson team is built to spread teams out and then run the ball down their throats. They've had a ton of successful running backs in the system. It sort of shifted away with Deshaun Watson because, yes, obviously, it has to shift away with Deshaun Watson. He's that good, but the receivers block so well. This is a team that sideline to sideline open up lanes and creases, whatever, and he runs in an unbelievably confident way. Also, he went on, I don't think it matters in this game.
Okay, so let's go there.
Yeah.
What are the most interesting matchups in this game that you're going to be watching? I have 4 on my list.
All right, it's going to be the same thing that is the matchup that I pay attention to in every game. It's, can you stop Alabama from rushing the passer with only 4 guys? Okay. With only Quinnen Williams and everybody along that defensive line. If Alabama gets pressure, if Alabama is collapsing pockets, if Alabama is wrapping up Travis Etienne or whoever, at the line of scrimmage, with only really bringing those 4 guys up front, the game's over. That's just how it works.
Quinnen Williams might be the best player in college football. And again, Notre Dame's front was really good a week ago, and I thought Clemson handled them accordingly. This is a different beast. It's a different beast just in Quinnen Williams. He's a top 5 pick. Does Clemson have a plan for dealing with him? Yeah, that's imperative.
Yeah, no, that to me is probably question number 1. Question number 2 is, and I think it was partially answered because we have now seen Trevor Lawrence against a really excellent defense in Notre Dame, is what does Trevor Lawrence look like in terms of early poise? Because Alabama is a team that, they're up 17-3 4 minutes into the game. And so Clemson can't start slow. I don't think they can come back in this game. So what does Trevor Lawrence, what does this passing attack look like early on, first quarter? Right. Do they come out scripted, jitter-free, and confident? And this is not going to be a situation, again, I'm not in team meetings. This is an assumption. The playbook available and the progressions available to Trevor Lawrence probably won't look like what Deshaun Watson had in his final year at Clemson. So how does a pared down or at least different looking offensive playbook with Trevor Lawrence running things look like early? What does that feel like? Where's the confidence? Are they testing Alabama deep early and not doing what Washington did against Ohio State, essentially?
Yeah, I've got Trevor Lawrence versus the Bama secondary on my list as well. Keep in mind, he carved up Notre Dame for 327, 3 touchdowns, and the line gave him enough time to pick his spots. This point kind of works with our previous point. How does the line deal with Alabama's front? We saw Jake Fromm from Georgia have a superb game against Alabama in the SEC title game, so it's doable. We know it's doable. And this Clemson wide receiving core is probably the best Alabama's seen all year. They go like 4 or 5 deep. They're really good. If Trevor Lawrence can play at or near the same level as a week ago, I think the Clemson offense is in really good shape through the air. I think that's the main way they move the ball, though, because to your point, the ground game doesn't feel quite as promising for Clemson.
Yeah, and again, nothing to do with this line, nothing to do with Travis Etienne or anybody toting the rock for Clemson. Thank you.
Yeah.
Toting. It's more the formula as we've seen. And again, nothing is in stone. But from what we've seen of teams, it was Deshaun Watson giving every ounce of his life, being, his pants were torn. He was hit so hard. It's going to have to happen through the air. It's going to have to happen vertically. It's going to have to happen fearlessly. And as you mentioned, yes, this Clemson receiving core is not only the best the best wide receiving core that Alabama has faced all year long. It's probably the best wide receiving core that anybody's faced outside of teams that have played Alabama, I suppose.
Right. Yeah.
And so they have Justin Ross and T. Higgins, both 6'4", both bigger bodies who will go up and challenge for balls with anybody. They've got Hunter Renfrow, who is as dangerous a slot receiver as we've seen on a major level, and then 9 other 4-stars. Yeah. And then Amari Rodgers, who is just a yak machine, and a lot to account for. I think a big difference, though, is you will notice I did not mention a tight end there.
Right.
You will notice I did not mention a big threat over the middle, which whether it was Evan Ingram, whether it was, I suppose, a little bit of Ryan Swope, even though he wasn't a tight end for Texas A&M, Jordan Leggett most recently, there is that element of force Alabama to account for every blade of grass. And I don't know if I fully see that with this group. If there's any very small criticism I have about what is available for Clemson in terms of personnel, that may be it.
The other matchup to me, that's the top of my list, and it probably goes without saying, but it's Clemson's defensive line against Alabama's offensive line. In many ways, it's strength on strength. If you want to zoom in on a matchup, Jonah Williams against Cleveland Farrell is going to be a war maybe breaks even. I don't know if it breaks one way or the other. Christian Wilkins versus the interior bit of the Bama line probably favors Clemson. But if we zoom out and think about this more holistically, the foundation of Alabama's offense for umpteen years now under Nick Saban has been that they can fall back on the ground game. If all the other stuff isn't working, they can always fall back on the ground game. If Clemson can somehow alter that ground game, it puts a lot more pressure on Tua. And I think that's the key here. He's nicked up. He looked good last week.
He did. He moved well.
If you can force him to move around more, if you can force him to throw into tighter windows, he's an accurate passer, but let's see what he can do in another big game situation such as this. I think the winning formula for Clemson's defense has to start with them curtailing that Alabama rushing attack to some degree.
A really good sign for Clemson is just how many bodies they rotate in and out. And Alabama does the same thing on defense, because as we saw last year in the national championship game, what ultimately, obviously, Tua was the big difference in the second half.
Right.
But what did we see from the Alabama offense, which is something we have seen in years past? I will answer said question. A weird running back closer.
Right.
We had seen it in previous years with Bo Scarborough as okay, we're going to wear you down. All right, here comes Rod Beck. Here is, I haven't said the name Rod Beck in a long time, Ty.
Okay.
Listen, you give me an option to name check somebody with a giant Fu Manchu. I'm just going to do it. Listen.
That's right.
Last year it was Najee Harris. Najee Harris is once again, the best running back in the 2016 class, I want to say. Maybe 17 class, yeah. He's the third string back. You have Damian Harris, you have Josh Jacobs. They're sort of, Damian Harris is bigger, Jacobs is sort of faster, Najee Harris is sort of everything. And so if Clemson can avoid the sort of exhaustion that Georgia faced after going 4 quarters and overtime against Alabama, that's going to be enormous because they just keep tapping their shoulder to bring in the next righty. It's unbelievable to me.
A couple other quick points here.
Yeah.
Don't take your eye off special teams in this game.
Do not.
If there is one chink in the armor for Clemson, for Alabama, this is it. It's been a soft spot for both teams this season. Mm-hmm. And there's a prop. We're going to talk quickly about some of the props towards the end of this show. Yeah. There is a prop. I think it's plus 190, which means you would bet $10 to win 19.
Yeah, I saw this.
On there being a defensive or special teams touchdown in the college football playoff national championship, which I don't believe has ever happened before in the history of college football playoff national championship games. I'd be willing to throw a few shekels on that one because both special teams are just shaky enough that something could break one way or the other.
True. I think Clemson returned a punt for a touchdown and Alabama returned a kick for a touchdown, and Alabama has Jalen Waddle, who is just absurd.
Lightning.
Just absolutely crazy. And we saw it, it was 2-3 years ago? I guess it was 3 years ago because it was the year Alabama won the surprise onside kick.
Sure.
So in terms of special teams playing a role here, and both of these teams having some busts in special teams, can you imagine what would be going through the minds and hearts of Alabama fans if it comes down to like a 48-yard field goal attempt and the PTSD involved? And let's not actually feel bad for Alabama fans, but even still, that's a reality of emotion. I think you're right. I would also probably not bet that because I'm against fun, but I understand why you would bet it just because of the shakiness of the units involved.
What is the key matchup to you, though? If you're picking one, what is the key matchup that's going to decide this game?
I think we probably already talked about it. Trevor Lawrence throwing into the Alabama defense, because so much we have a concept of what Tua looks like repeatedly against top flight defenses. And we know the line in front of him is really good, in front of both quarterbacks, really. We know the receivers are good. There is just something about Alabama's secondary early on, as we mentioned, giving up some bigger plays. And what we have, Patrick Surtain Jr., a true freshman, starting on one side. We have maybe the best safety in the country in Deontay Thompson playing center field. But there will be yardage to be had. And looking at these props, one that I really, really do like, as I think there is an over-under for longest pass completed for each of these quarterbacks. And they're both around 40, if I remember correctly. It's about 41.5 and 39.5. I think both of these quarterbacks complete 45-plus yard passes in this game.
Okay.
But yes, in terms of the specific matchup that decides it, it is Trevor Lawrence having enough time, feeling calm enough, and feeling confident enough. And there's every indication that he will, based on what we saw against Notre Dame on that big stage, I'm going to give my receiver a chance to make a play against a top flight secondary and it not check down all the time and have coaches trust him to make big throws, post corner routes to the back pylon, stuff like that. What does he look like as a true freshman? Because we've had really good true freshman quarterbacks, not like this, not being counted on this level to make the kinds of plays that he will have to make for Clemson to beat a clear dynasty.
I think I'm honed in on Clemson's secondary.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Against deep balls, against intermediate throws. Notre Dame left some points on the board, and it was because Ian Book couldn't stretch the field. The deep ball, even some intermediate throws, they were there. If Tua gets time, he's going to do a lot better than Ian Book. I think we know that. We already know he throws a great deep ball. In general, he's super accurate. On top of that, Bama has way more weaponry. With Notre Dame, we had Miles Boykin, we had Chase Claypool, we had Alizé Mack. Bama goes 5 deep.
I don't even think Jalen Waddle had a catch against Oklahoma.
They go 5 deep. They go 5 deep with guys who could win one-on-one matchups.
Yeah.
You can start with Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. You talked about Jalen Waddle. Goes all the way down to Irv Smith Jr. They had 5 receivers on this team with at least 6 touchdown receptions and 600 yards on the year. That's going to put a big strain on that secondary, and I think that's a matchup that favors Alabama. So to that end, while we're talking about props, the one that jumps out at me, and I'm sure there are more, this is still pretty early on in the game. We're doing this on a Thursday. There are going to be more that pop up, but Devontae Smith over under 47.5 yards, I think is a real interesting proposition bet on the receiving side because Bam is going to put pressure on the
He's sort of an all or nothing guy.
A third, a fourth receiver, a tight end, someone kind of in that wavelength is going to find themselves with a really big game here. And like you said, he is all or nothing. It might only take one catch for him to get the over there.
I really like, what's the Ruggs over under?
The Ruggs over-under is 49.5 yards.
I like that one a lot because I do anticipate Clemson being able to get to Tua a bunch.
Wow.
And just in terms of short hitches and crossing routes, and he's so good after the catch. Not that he doesn't run deeper routes as well, but he is just so electric with the ball that Ruggs, to me, almost feels like a more consistent, a safer pick to me to eclipse the 49.5, whatever it is.
Mine are all kind of interrelated. And in a weird way, I didn't plan this, I swear, they all kind of work on what I was seeing when I was trying to do some research on this one. So if you assume two things. First off, that Alabama is going to spread the rock around in the backfield, going to give a bunch of carries out. Last week, it was actually Josh Jacobs who led the team in carries. If you also assume that the defensive line for Clemson is going to somewhat curtail the rushing attack from Alabama, the under for Damian Harris rushing yards at 50.5 seems like a pretty good bet. I don't like to root for unders because it's just not fun.
Right.
But I think from a betting perspective, under 50.5 yards is a pretty good bet there.
Yeah, the coolest person at the sports bar is the one who says, I have the under.
No, I don't want to be that
We all
guy.
watched a terrible game, and I'm profiting.
So with that being said, if the running game isn't there, it puts more pressure on Tua to throw it. And I think over 2.5 passing touchdowns is the move for Tua.
I could see, by the way, what's 2 for Trevor Lawrence?
2, yeah.
Could 100% see him vulturing his own touchdown over under and running it in from like the 4 on a keep or something like that when he has 2 already and just pushes. Could 100% see that. By the way, I don't know if you noticed this because you were probably spiking all of your electronics during the Notre Dame Clemson game. I had always been under the impression it was Cleland Farrell.
Okay.
But I think who was calling?
It was Sean McDonough, your boy.
It was my guy, Sean McDonough. He was making a point of saying Cleland Farrell.
Yeah.
And this is probably something all Clemson fans already knew, but it did remind me of like the Monte Ball, Mariota, where Sean McDonough, who I'm positive does more research into his games than humanly possible. It was a nice little nugget that I hope is true. That it's just Furl.
Mariota!
Tonga Vailoa. So back to your point, though. I think you're right. I think you're right about everything. I like the way you're leaning with the props.
My final prediction here is Alabama 33, Clemson 28. I think a good game. I think a tight game. I would not want to be on the side of or Clemson, for that matter, minus anything. That's
almost the exact over-under that it opened at, right? I think it was a 61-ish, maybe 61.5 with like a 5-6 point. So you're right there.
Yeah. 33-28 feels about right to me. Would not want to lay 6 points here. I feel like these teams are pretty close. These games have a tendency to either make it closer or turn it into a blowout. And I think it's going to make it closer. 33-28 is my final.
Yeah, I'm going to be the under guy, which is the worst way to announce yourself as a superhero.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to be the under guy. I have 28-23. I have it as almost a very Rose Bowl-ish game. I think it's a slower start for Clemson. I think they storm back impressively, but it's not quite enough. And so I'm going with the under here. I think it's relatively low scoring because of these defenses, because of each of these teams' pass rushes. And so somewhere in that vicinity. Now, it's probably prudent to ask another question. If there is a blowout, it's definitely Alabama winning?
I would say most likely, yeah.
Okay. Because we should have asked that question before the playoff, because I would have been able to revel in a correct prediction for once this season. But yes, it probably is Alabama. And somebody asked us, so we're going to review some Twitter questions here in a moment, and we can just go into it right now. Alabama's in pretty good shape if Tua randomly rolls an ankle, which we are not hoping for at all.
No.
Re-injures the ankle that is hurt. If Trevor Lawrence gets hurt.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's it.
That's a problem.
Well, no disrespect to Chase Bryce. Seems like a perfectly nice young man. We're so old.
Getting very old, yeah.
I think that's that. I think that's all she wrote. So yeah, I think that if there is a blowout, it's Alabama over Clemson. But wouldn't it be something if Clemson just laid the wood?
Yeah, that would be something.
Wouldn't it? If it was like, oh, Clemson just won the national championship 38-10. They just boat raced them and then slowly crock-potted them. Whatever verbiage you want to use. It would feel out of nowhere.
All right. So here's the deal. You got questions. Hopefully we've got some answers. I'll start with a question that I actually didn't ask you yet. I suppose I know the answer, but we did some halftime streams during the 2 playoff semifinals. Can people expect more streams from you and I on Monday evening, maybe pregame, maybe during halftime, maybe a quick one postgame?
I mean, sure. Let us know if you prefer which time, all times. I don't know. We'll do whatever you guys want. But I'm game. It'll be Instagram, right? Solid Verbal is the Instagram handle.
We'll do it on the Instagram.
It'll be on Instagram because I don't think you can easily do side by side on Periscope.
Right.
But if you feel like doing something on Periscope, by all means, do something on Periscope from the Solid Verbal account. But yes, it'll be Instagram. It will be, maybe we'll do something pregame, answer some questions, and do halftime and postgame. Yeah, why not?
All right.
Also, there's no coaches show. Did you see that?
Oh, my God. I'm fit to be tied over this. So, the coaches' film room has effectively been replaced now by the Monday Night Football film room, which features Joe Tessitore, who we love. We love Joe Tessitore.
Sure.
As well as Jason Witten, Booger McFarland, and Todd McShay. I like Todd McShay as well. I might be another out-of-touch podcaster. I'm just not sure people were begging for more Jason Witten in their college football coverage.
Oh,
maybe it's just me. I don't know if it's just me.
Here was my question, really. Do you think it was ESPN saying, you know what, we're going to try something new and try to put our Monday Night Football crew in a more forward-facing college role so people can get used to them all over the sports spectrum? Or do you think the only coaches they can confirm were not big enough?
No, I think
and they pulled the plug.
I think it's they signed Jason Witten to a big contract, and now they want to try and get their money's worth.
Okay.
Like they bought the sous vide cooker, and now they want to cook everything with the sous vide cooker.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's entirely possible. I am very hopeful that somebody at ESPN said, all right, we've got Chris Ash, we've got Luke Fickell, But
that's not true. That's not true.
I know they can get big names. We've got Kalani Sitake,
right?
And it just with the roster. All due respect to all of those coaches who do varying degrees of jobs. I think it's possible. I think it's possible that maybe they had one big name because you can get Mac Brown. You can obviously get Mac Brown,
even if you only have 3 guys or 2 guys in the booth.
Even if it were just the coaches that work for ESPN. I know a lot of people don't love Jim Mora, but if you just had like a very nerdy film room with maybe a recently retired coach, I don't know, whoever it is.
They still can add texture to the coverage. They still know what they're doing to some degree.
Put Richt on camera.
Camera.
And try to get, I mean, it's a tough ask, but like get Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley on camera.
What about Urban? What's he doing?
Yeah, Urban's got ESPN connections.
Urban will do that.
Well, he's teaching. He's a professor now, Ty. That was disappointing. And again, we put this offer out on Twitter. If any FBS head coach wants to come over to either one of our places in Eastern PA or in New York, we will feed you. We will put a webcam on you.
That's right.
And we will stream out the game. The camera facing the couch, not the TV screen.
Extremely low rent, but we'll do it. I'll drive to your place. You can drive to mine. We'll figure out a way.
We will feed you. Yeah. So I have 28-23. I'm going to miss the film room. I'm not going to watch the halftime concert. Do you have a final hop fensive coordinator recommendation? Because I do.
Okay.
Because
go ahead. You go first.
We have a brewery that we are just enormous fans of that is probably the college football brewery in America.
Yeah.
That's Druid City.
Yeah.
In Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I don't know their distribution plan. I don't know how far and wide they are available, but if you can get your hands on some Druid City, they are not paying us. They are not sponsors. We just know and appreciate their enthusiasm for the sport. That would be my pick.
Okay, I need more time to think. I was not prepared for this question.
I know. I caught you off guard here.
So let's talk about some other questions here, and then we'll wrap with my final hop offensive coordinator suggestion.
Okay, let's go to number one. This is from Ian. What is the drop-off from Dexter Lawrence at defensive tackle to Albert Huggins, who started against Notre Dame?
Not that big. Not that big.
He seemed to be successful.
He seemed like he could do a pretty good job there, Dan.
Yeah, we mentioned this before. He is his strength primarily, according to people who are more familiar with him than we are, is getting after the passer more so than he's not a double team necessity against the run. So maybe that's a big difference if Alabama really plans on pounding the ball on the ground. Maybe that's a difference, but in terms of actual talent and technique, drop-off does not seem at least to be significant. And he also, as we mentioned, everybody on this defense rotates in and out. So he was already playing 20-25 snaps a game against the better team.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that too much.
Do you think, Travis Etienne, this just came in from Elliot, not East Coast Elliot, just Ann Elliott.
Hello, Elliot.
Do you think Travis Etienne can exploit Alabama through the air/ground, like Swift's 63 yards in the air and 75 yards on the ground in the SEC championship game? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. So you were talking about guys going over the middle, and about Clemson not having so much that tight end threat. Their leading tight end this season had something like 6 catches. Travis Etienne wasn't noted for coming out of the backfield much. Only had 11 catches, 1 touchdown on the year. I'd be curious to see if he's a guy that they can be a little bit more creative with in this game. If they're looking to exploit the middle, if they can't do it with Hunter Renfrow, if Etienne out of the backfield could play more of that DeAndre Swift role.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. And I think the answer is probably somewhat, but what's true of these Alabama defenses that we've seen is as soon as somebody finds a hole, this staff is very quick to plug it.
Yeah.
And I imagine they're going to have some answers with a very athletic linebacking core, and they're not going to be able to run stride for stride with Travis Etienne, but some sort of bracketing. We got a question about, let me find the actual question, but it was about RPOs and how, there we go. This is from Zane, which, by the way,
great name.
Totally underrated name. Yeah. Zane. I like it.
Great name.
Zane, whose Twitter handle is Crimson Tide 28. So just a neutral observer.
Sure.
How does Clemson defend Bama's RPOs? First of all,
yeah,
I don't know. Second of all, we actually did a show with our dear friend Chris B. Brown, Crispy of Smart Football, and he talked a lot about what the most successful defensive minds have tried to do and have had some success with in playing against teams that run a lot of RPO stuff. And not to get overly technical, both because it's not really good to get overly technical in audio form, and also I don't fully know what I'm talking about here, but it's a lot of bracketing. It's a lot of breaking the actual defense down into multiple parts of the field and saying, okay, these 3 guys are bracketing here. And it's a lot of being very hopeful that you can get pressure really quickly and get hands up. You get those, you start throwing into a forest, RPOs become difficult. Tua Tagovailoa, for all that he is, not the tallest dude in the world.
Not a big dude. No, he's not Trevor Lawrence.
So it's a lot of disruption. It's some chance taking, but again, it's Tua reading specific players. So it's not like you can do something specific. You can't necessarily always dictate what the offense does because they're waiting for you to make a move or not make a move, and they'll just hand it off.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a lot of that. There's a reason Clemson has perhaps the best defense in the country, and it's because teams try to throw a lot at them, and nothing much sticks. So I imagine nothing will be dramatically different with the way that Clemson handles these things. Their linebackers are, I think they've got, Kendall Joseph is still there, right? I think he's been there for 17 years, but yes.
That's correct.
Their linebackers are really, really good. I don't know if they're fully on the level of previous year's linebackers, and that's mostly because they really haven't been tested. So I imagine it's going to be that sort of communication, bracketing, and saying, okay, this 5 by 5 yard chunk is me. And it's that matchup zone mentality that Alabama has run probably better than anybody else. So you're showing things. What was the phrase that you had never heard of? Seeing ghosts.
Yeah, no, I don't like
it's
that.
It's making Tua see ghosts. By the way, I got a text from our friend Yogi Roth.
Yeah.
From the Pac-12 network. And the text was, never heard of seeing ghosts? Come on, Ty.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So
you ever hear of Globe tomatoes? Me neither.
No, Ty, you're onto something that I'm not. You're hip to a new breed of tomato.
That's right.
So I think that's what it is. I think what it is going to come down to is making plays, keeping the ball in front of you, maybe forcing the give, and hoping for the best with the interior of your defensive line. All
right, 2 more really quick questions. Let's close out strong, Dan. Close out strong. One final game here. Clemson, Alabama for all the marbles.
Well, Steven wants to know, cowards, analyze the real title game. You have North Dakota State or Eastern Washington.
I have North Dakota State, yeah.
Bison -14 with a coach heading elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I go Bison. I played that game before. I'm not going there again. Bison minus anything.
Colgate's keeping it close, 35-0. Womp womp. That's pretty much all of the questions that are directly related to this. I will close with the same sort of thought that we sort of opened the show with. And that is, relative to, I guess, other games this year, relative to previous national championship games or previous big college football games, we are in agreement that we are interested in all sorts of angles with this game. As a story, as a broader narrative, where does this game register in your mind? With I don't know what the height is with something like that for you. If it was USC Texas, if it was like a huge Notre Dame USC matchup, if it was whatever it was, I don't know. But in terms of the Tie excitement-o-meter, the football arousal zone of your brain.
Wow, that's deep.
Are there neurons firing on a high level?
There will be on Monday night.
Okay.
There will be on Monday night. We do a college football show. We've done it for 10 years.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a national championship game that I don't get fired up for. And I think this is no different. I'm excited to watch this game. It might not have the high-level intrigue that some other games have had, but when this one rolls around on Monday evening, I'm going to be fired up. And I'm going to be drinking some Dogfish Head Midas Touch.
You love that Dogfish Head.
Midas Touch. You don't need much of it. We all got to go to work the next day. Which quarterback, which team will have the Midas Touch?
Oh, okay. So you're taking the slight over. I'm taking actually a healthy under. We both are taking the points, but taking Clemson in the points, right? Yes?
Yeah, yep, correct.
About 5 points, but sort of barely. And we're just hoping for drama. I think that's why this actually, to answer my own question, it still registers pretty low. I remember being pretty excited about Florida State Auburn and the crazy offense that Florida State had that year and how strongly Auburn, especially on offense, finished out. That would have been 2013?
Yeah, right.
Getting the rematch of Alabama Clemson with Deshaun Watson was pretty incredible to me. I'm just looking at the games since we started the show. I'm not counting Oregon games because obviously I was excited for those. So I think we're in we're in our 10th, 11th year.
No.
This is probably 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in there for me.
All right. Well, on that note, we both like Bama to win, Clemson to cover. Do stay tuned to our Twitter feed, our Facebook page, our Instagram account, where we're going to be doing some live video. Stay tuned for the wheres and whens. As always, please reach out, solidverbal@gmail.com if you've got something to say. We welcome any and all feedback as we build towards the capstone game in the college football season. One more time, it is Clemson. It is Alabama. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, enjoy the football game on Monday evening. We'll be back with you in podcast form. I don't know what, midday, Tuesday?
Yeah, we'll record first thing Tuesday. And we're not going to stay up until 1 a.m. We've done that in the past and we've been on site. We're old. We're washed. We'll wake up first thing Tuesday morning. We'll record and we'll get something out to you, hopefully by around lunchtime, Tuesday Eastern time.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, Enjoy the game. Enjoy your weekend. Stay solid.
Peace.